Just going to run this dog to see if we can find any type of human remains that are left.
Listen to Where Secrets Go to Die, The Disappearance of Derek Hennigan. From the Detroit Free Press, a new podcast set in the woods of Michigan's Upper Peninsula. Available on Apple, Spotify, Freep.com, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Now, the BuckeyeXtra podcast with Rob Oller, Bill Rabinowitz, and Joey Kaufman from the Columbus Dispatch.
Hey everyone, it's the BuckeyeXtra football podcast, the Columbus Dispatch's all everything podcast for Ohio State football. I'm Joey Kaufman, joined by Bill Rabinowitz and Rob Oller. It is Wednesday, March 6th, and yesterday was the first day of spring football practice. We were permitted to watch the first 45 minutes or so, so we got to get some eyelids on a handful of new faces around the Buckeyes, from Chip Kelly to Will Howard, Quinshon Judkins, Caleb Downs, Jeremiah Smith. And now we're going to talk about all that start of spring football practice. Rob, Bill, how are you guys doing?
Doing fine. It was
just fantastic.
It didn't seem like there was much of a break between the 23 season and the start of the 24 season, did it? I mean, it seemed like the Cotton Bowl was about 2 weeks ago. What was interesting about this is there were so many familiar faces, right? I mean, all those guys, Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, Denzel Burke, Travion Henderson. I mean, all those guys that could have gone to the NFL are back. And I'm not sure a year ago we would have thought that many or any of them would still be Buckeyes. Plus, you've got the new guys, the Will Howards and Caleb Downs, Quinshon Judkins, Seth McLaughlin. The thing that stood out to me about Will Howard, how big he is. He's a big guy. He's 6'5", 240. He looks every bit that big. I mean, I get to see him being in the pocket and just somebody hitting him and just kind of glancing off of him. I just didn't realize just how big he was.
I think Urban would be licking his chops to run him 20 times a game.
Yeah, I don't think that was smart, but
he's probably the body to handle it, because he probably could take some wear and tear.
That's true.
It's going to be an interesting quarterback room. That's all I got to say. Devin Brown definitely's got some edge. He definitely is not giving up any ground on being the starter. He was pretty strong in his comments, but also just as strong saying he's not going anywhere. He's not leaving. We'll see. we'll see. He says that, but I mean, what happens if he comes out of it? I don't think this will happen, and he's like the fourth guy. I mean, I don't think he'll be the fourth guy out of spring, but what if he's the third guy? I don't think that'll happen either. So I think it's a moot point, but that room is going to be I'd love to be a fly on the wall.
Well, what's interesting about it is, well, first of all, we talked to some of the players on Monday. So, and then we had the practice Tuesday. If you're Devin Brown, and let's say you are the backup, and that's the most likely scenario. I mean, look, he could go out there and play great this spring. Will Howard could struggle some, and you got a real competition on your hands, and Devin Brown could win it. I mean, that's within the realm of possibility, and credit to Devin Brown for thinking that way. But let's just say he's the backup. Well, Will Howard's a one-year guy, and Devin Brown will have been in the system for a long time, and he probably figures, I don't care about the true freshmen. I've got a leg up on these guys that have been in the system. I'll be the starter next year. So it's not like Will Howard's going to be a 3-year starter at Ohio State. He's got 1 year.
That's the interesting thing about this quarterback room, because it is crowded. It's got 5 scholarship quarterbacks. It would be the most Ohio State has. Yeah, it would be the most Ohio State has had on scholarship in Ryan Day's tenure. He's typically had 4 guys on scholarship, so it is more than normal. And in this era of college football, it's really hard to fathom keeping that many talented arms on one roster. On the other hand, the way they're staggered in their eligibility, it makes me do wonder if it is a needle they could possibly thread, because Will Howard, Bill, as you said, he's gone after this year. This is his last year of eligibility. And you have 2 true freshmen. You have a redshirt freshman, Lincoln Keenelson, and you have a redshirt sophomore, and Devin Brown. Even Devin Brown, the oldest guy in the room, if he doesn't win the starting job, he could conceivably come back to Ohio State next year and still have 2 years of eligibility where he starts. So nobody's under a pressing clock in terms of their eligibility expiring, where they only have 1 or 2 years left to play, and then their time's up. And so that makes me, I think, wonder if there could be too much ado made about the portal, and maybe that'll all change in April and May. But I do think it's something the worth considering.
Just going to run this dog to see if we can find any type of human remains that are left.
Listen to Where Secrets Go to Die, The Disappearance of Derek Hennigan. From the Detroit Free Press, a new podcast set in the woods of Michigan's Upper Peninsula. Available on Apple, Spotify, Freep.com, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'd be shocked if there's not at least one transfer after the spring. It's just that's the world we're in today. I mean, we can sit here and think, oh, these guys love the place and all five will be here, but I don't see that happening.
Well, I think
no, but I guess I only raise it as a possibility because there's nobody who's like Joe Burrow when he transferred, where he was competing with Dwayne Haskins and he had 2 years of eligibility left and he needed to basically play now if he was ever going to start in college football. There's nobody who quite fits that profile. You could say maybe Devin Brown. He does have 3 years left. Depends how urgently he may feel about his timeline. But the other guys are all freshmen with 4 years of eligibility left.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't think it's all speculation. I could see Lincoln transferring.
Yeah, if he sees kind of no opening, if he sees the true freshmen, Julian Sayin and Aaron Nolan are really good, and he sees that Will Howard's the guy or Devin Brown's the guy, and he sees, okay, I'm kind of caught in the middle here. I can, but again, this is the first day of practice. There's no need to jump the gun here and start talking about this. Let's let it play out. I mean, Lincoln Kenold's just like anyone else could end up being, really good this spring. And I mean, people are going to judge him based off the Cotton Bowl, which is really not a fair thing to do because he got thrust into that and wasn't nearly ready. It was interesting yesterday. I was watching the quarterbacks take some snaps just in little snapping drills, and the 2 freshmen both fumbled the ball in the same snap. It was like, they're freshmen. Obviously not a big deal, but it was just kind of amusing that they both fumbled at the same snap.
I think to keep in mind too, Bill, as far as Lincoln goes, this is his first spring practice at Ohio State. He did not enroll early last year. He was a basketball and baseball player in South Dakota, multi-sport athlete, and that was the reason he wanted to keep playing those sports and didn't actually enroll in June. So he's in the same sort of, not identical, but this is his first April practicing with Ohio State, same as Aaron Nolan and Julian Sayin.
It's going to be interesting because we're acting like freshmen never start, and freshmen are starting to start around the country. I mean, maybe not true freshmen, redshirt freshmen, but I wouldn't just write guys off. Well, maybe the true freshmen. We'll see. I mean, how good they are.
I'm writing off the 2 freshmen as starting possibilities. I'm writing them off.
Well, go ahead and write them off. That's fine. I'm just saying that nationally, this isn't 1965 where freshmen will never play, or 1975. Freshmen now come in much more prepared. Again, I'm not saying they're going to start or win the job, but I think that it's a freshman today is not a freshman from even a decade ago. And they're going to play the guy they think helps them win. I would think that's Will Howard 1. I would think that's Devin Brown 2. But like you said, Bill, we've got a whole spring to let this play out. I mean, I'm thinking of guys like Tua, there have been guys who have, really come on. Now, none of these guys are supposedly in that category, but I think it's going to be fun to watch.
It's not all that long ago that C.J. Stroud started as a redshirt freshman. I think that's typically been more maybe the threshold to cross for Ohio State quarterbacks. You need to maybe have at least a year in your system, in the system, or being a year on campus to help. Justin Fields maybe a little bit of an exception where he was a second-year guy, but it's been his freshman season at Georgia before transferring. But really, true freshman is pretty rare.
I mean, I think there's about an 80% chance, if not higher, that Will Howard's a starter. I mean, I just think that he's a prohibitive favorite. They brought him in for a reason. He came here for a reason. He's played well enough at Kansas State to think that he's knows what he's doing and can do a good job here. I mean, Devin Brown I don't say he had his only shot. It's not his only shot, but he had his shot for now in the Cotton Bowl, and we know what happened. Not his fault. He got hurt. But Ohio State couldn't go into this year with Devin Brown as the clear starter and freshman as the alternative. So they brought Will Howard in for a reason. Look, they waited to offer Will Howard until the Cotton Bowl because they wanted to give Devin Brown a shot. And so they saw what they saw, or didn't see what they didn't see, or saw what they didn't see, and that's when they made the move. I thought one of the more interesting things we saw yesterday at practice was that it was on the offensive line. I kind of thought that Josh Fryer, the right tackle, would move inside, but instead they had Luke Montgomery at right guard and Fryer at right tackle. And Montgomery's a natural tackle. He was the the kind of the marquee Ohio lineman recruit last year, and they really like him. And they think Ryan Day said they think he can be a good guard. He's got the assets to be that. I thought that was interesting. And I also thought it was interesting that Carson Hinsman was at center and not Seth McLaughlin. That may have been just the first day, and we're going to not just make the change right away. I think Seth McLaughlin is the clear favorite to be the center. But he said Ryan Day said very positive things about Carson Hinsman, who let's face it, struggled last year and got benched for the Cotton Bowl.
They certainly give a nod to seniority in certain spots. You saw Carson Hinsman at center. You saw Travion Henderson first in line in running back drills, not Quinshon Judkins. You saw Devin Brown first in line in quarterback drills, even sometimes followed by Lincoln Kienholz, and then Will Howard. The exception to the rule was Caleb Downs lining up as the starting free safety, the adjuster vacated by Josh Proctor. I think maybe it was too far for them not to put
a bridge too far.
Caleb Downs on the first team defense out there. I think that would be bridge too far.
Caleb Downs might be the best player on the team. I mean, he's really, really good. I'm not saying that based on anything we saw yesterday because we didn't see much yesterday, but based on what he did as a freshman at Alabama. If you think about how good the defense was last year and they didn't really lose many people from that defense. I mean, Josh Proctor played well last year, but Caleb Downs is a significant upgrade over Josh Proctor. And you have all these other guys that are just a year older and presumably a year better.
The other interesting develop on defense is they have Rob.
Raise your hands, boys.
Sonny Styles may be moving to linebacker. He lined up there during practice Tuesday. As went through all the practice drills with that position. He was listed on the roster as a safety still. They were non-committal about whether he was a full-fledged linebacker. They said he moved around to other spots as well. But that's, I think, one of the other sort of interesting storylines to watch this spring is how they use Sonny.
Yeah, listen, we'll get into Chip Kelly, but listen to Chip Kelly. He'd love to have Caleb Downs on offense. Yeah. And hey, could we be seeing a Chris Gamble situation? Who knows? I kind of doubt it because it seems like the wide receivers are stacked. But Chip Kelly was just raving about watch the tape of this kid in high school on offense. How good he was! He must just be a phenom. He must be a phenom.
I can't see him playing offense, but I could see him returning punts. Caleb Downs being
That's been a weakness for Ohio State.
I didn't see him back. I didn't see him back there returning punts on yesterday. I'll have to watch closer tomorrow. But I didn't see him. I saw Jalen Ballard, a bunch of the other wide receivers, but not Caleb Downs, who actually had returned punts as a freshman at Alabama.
They can change that in a heartbeat. They can stick him in the fall to do that. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about Chip Kelly a little bit. The first time we had a chance to talk to him, he has this reputation of being a little prickly or at least a little quirky. He was really engaging yesterday. He was funny. He was insightful. He talked about, being happy. And that's why he decided to make this move. I mean, very rare. I can't even think of a time, almost unprecedented, when a guy who was the head coach at a major program like UCLA, and UCLA is not elite, but it's a major program, willingly steps down to become an offensive coordinator at another school. I just don't know. I mean, maybe it's happened before. I can't think of when it's happened. And he just explained that during the bowl preparation for UCLA last year, their quarterback's coach had left to become the offensive coordinator at Oregon State. And so Chip Kelly had to be the de facto quarterback's coach during bowl prep. And he loved it. Been a long time since he coached a position group, and he thought, this is actually what I like. I can get, kind of down in the dirt with these guys and really get to know them. I don't have to be the CEO coach, which is what being a head coach is these days. And he thought, well, if the right situation presents itself, I would consider doing it. Well, when Bill O'Brien left Ohio State after a couple of weeks to go to BC, there it was. And he seems really happy to be here at Ohio State. And Ryan Day is thrilled to have him here at Ohio State. Obviously, those guys go back really for most of Ryan Day's life.
Yeah, I found the whole thing pretty interesting. You're right. He's engaging. He's funny. I do wonder. I mean, let's not act like. I mean, let's be real here. He did interview or was very interested in the NFL, the Seattle Seahawks job. So
Right.
he said he said, oh, it would take a lot. It would have to be the right place. Well, apparently Seattle was the right place. Now, I guess he could have interviewed and just said no if they'd offered it. But he was looking to get out of UCLA. This wasn't just an opportunity for us. He wanted out of UCLA. He didn't like, from the reports you hear, Joey might know more than I do on this. Probably he's got connections out there. He wasn't that interested in recruiting. I mean, I'm not trying to dump on him, but I'm just saying that this was an interesting discussion we had yesterday with him, because I do believe he may be happier. He's taken a major pay cut. I mean, probably by half. Not that he needs the money, but he was making almost $6 million at UCLA. I would guess he'd make not even $3 million. Jim Knowles is making $1.9 million.
Just a shade under $2 million. We have not gotten.
So Chip makes 2.1 or something, or 2.5 even, but that's still half of what he was making. So it's a very interesting move. It's one of the most interesting, if not the most interesting hire I can remember.
The way Chip talked about it yesterday, it made sense to me. I think the presumption when he came here was that he just wanted to coach ball, because for a college coach nowadays, there's a lot on the plate, from fundraising for NIL, from roster management, from the portal. I mean, you were just wearing a lot of different hats. You're wearing your general manager hat. You're wearing your marketing manager hat. You're wearing your football coach hat. I think Chip Kelly just wants to wear the football coach hat at this stage in his life. I think the perspective out west tends to be, well, he wasn't really wearing those other hats in the first place. He wasn't very involved in the boosters, and wasn't very involved in fundraising for NIL, and had let recruiting slip. And that was sort of a reason why UCLA got to the point it didn't really get over the hump with Chip Kelly. But he doesn't have to do those things now. I don't think if you're an Ohio State fan, you have to worry too much about some of those things. It's more, how can Chip Kelly fix a running game that can't seem to always convert on 3rd and 2. I mean, those are the problems that Chip Kelly is now faced with at Ohio State, and that's going to be what Ohio State fans are hoping he can correct.
And if he does that, then people will be very happy. I mean, he's got 2 freshman quarterbacks. Doesn't have to, he's not on the no pressure to go get the next stud right away. And look, that's a Ryan Day thing anyway. I mean, Chip Kelly can just be Chip Kelly and scribble on the napkins and do that kind of stuff, and everyone's happy as long as it works. And Joey, you wrote a story today about the tempo, and that's what he was originally known for when he was at Oregon. During the 2014 championship game, Ohio State had the number 16 written all over the facility, because that's what Oregon did, ran a snap every 16 seconds. And that was their big concern for that game, was that, are they going to get just worn out because of the tempo? Well, he still tends to go faster than most, but that's not, as he said, that's the side dish now. That's not the main course. And so he has to adapt. He's had to adapt. Defenses have caught up to the tempo stuff. And, what's his counter move? Well, we'll see. Look, he's also got more talent here than he's ever had anywhere else relative to the competition. Obviously in the NFL, it's a league of parity. And UCLA, he just didn't have the horses. I mean, he had some good players, but he didn't have, the overall talent he has at Ohio State.
His pace and the style of his offense at UCLA was certainly not quite the same hurry up that he ran at Oregon that became known as the blur there. So he slowed things down with the Bruins, but it was still a faster pace than Ohio State is typically run with Ryan Day. So from the perspective of if you're a Buckeye fan wanting to see them push the tempo a little more, that could happen with Chip Kelly. It just won't be that image you might have from 29 or 2010, sort of that era of Oregon football where they were going at such a crazy pace, running 80 plays a game. At the time, not a lot of schools were doing that, and I think it was difficult for a lot of teams to contend with that. Now tempo has sort of become so prevalent in college football that I don't think you're incentivized to use it to the same degree, which is sort of what Chip was saying yesterday. And they've changed the rules with the clock, where after a first down, you don't get the clock doesn't stop. And so I think that's changed as well. And here's the other thing too to probably keep in mind is the seasons are going to be longer now in college football with the expansion of the playoff. Ohio State you could play 16 games. So you also are now, I think, encouraged to reduce the wear and tear on players. And that's probably another factor to consider with tempo and increase the number of plays per game, is you don't want to get guys hurt in September, October, when you could be playing deeper into January.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great, I think you can tell that Ryan Day is really happy to have Chip Kelly with him. And, I asked Chip, how's he going to feel being the subordinate now, not the boss? And he said, I don't have to be Al Haig, which I'm not sure too many people in the room are old enough to get the reference. The reference is Al Haig, who was Ronald Reagan's Secretary of Defense, State. I forget what it was. Anyways, a cabinet official. And when Reagan was shot, they didn't know where the Vice President George H.W. Bush was, and so they had a press conference, and Al Haig was there, and he said, "I'm in control, or I'm in charge," and that kind of became what he was known for. So he said, "Look, Chip goes, I'm not in charge. It's Ryan Day's deal." And Ryan Day said, "Look, he's not working for me. He's working with me." And I do get that sense that it's always been collaborative, but it'll be even more so. I just think that they think alike when it comes to offensive football strategy. I just don't think there's going to be any kind of disharmony. I think that they're going to go at it because they're going to have strong opinions, and that's fine, but they're friends. They're friends first at this point. And so I think that's going to be interesting to watch. We'll see if we see the Chip Kelly imprint on the offense. But I get the sense that Ryan Day and Chip Kelly are really happy to be reunited.
I think that's true. I do think there's a tiny element of risk anytime you do something like this, for sure. I mean, everything sounds good in a press conference. When you get in that room and there's it's not just these two guys. How does Brian Hartline react to now that, Ryan Day and his buddy are running the show? There's just egos. That they're going to have to work through. Guys are going to have to. It's like a job. It's a job. So it's going to take some adjustment. How does the other side of the ball respond? How do the defensive coaches? How does it all fit together? So I think there's a tiny bit of risk. I'm not sure there's any more risk with than anybody else they'd have brought in, other than this friendship. I think Bill's right. I think probably the friendship is more positive than negative, but I think it's going to take some time and to see how this thing gels.
They do hang out together. I remember Ryan Day talking about it a couple years ago when the Big Ten added USC and UCLA. He was actually golfing with Chip at the time, so that's kind of the relationship they've had, where they would see each other at least in the summer, and back in New Hampshire. They both come from that same area. So even though Ryan Day has worked under Chip before, it seems like they've remained pretty congenial and close throughout the following years.
What you don't want is Chip Kelly being keeping with the political thing. You don't want Chip Kelly being Ryan Day's chief of staff, where he's in his ear and he's kind of all coaches are equal, but he's first among equals. I think that's something to keep an eye on too. Like, you just don't want that situation. So that's where I say there's a tiny bit of risk. I think that he does bring some toughness, even though he's kind of known as this innovator. And at Oregon, his Oregon teams weren't known to be super tough, but I think that has to do with stereotype and, Nike and the uniforms and that whole thing. Joey was out there covering that whole scene a little bit. So, the question that didn't get asked, which I'm going to ask, the next time I get a chance, is everything's great with Chip Kelly right now, as it should be. But let's not forget that Chip Kelly wasn't the first choice, at least not at that moment. Bill O'Brien was the first choice. That could have been a timing issue. Maybe Chip Kelly changed his mind and told Ryan Day initially, well, I'm not interested, and then changed his mind. Maybe things heated up at UCLA a little bit to help him change his mind. We don't know. But what we do know is that Bill O'Brien was the offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach for 3 weeks before Kelly came aboard. What do you guys make of that?
I think it's possible that Chip was exploring NFL jobs at that time. So
right.
you talk about the timing thing. I mean, he was clearly interested in the job in Washington, the Seattle job, and that may have been the first interest from. And that's the sense that I would have, is that he would have been exploring those opportunities, and maybe Bill O'Brien was more gettable in mid-January than Chip Kelly was.
I think if you were to ask Ryan Day, if you would have said after the Cotton Bowl, you have a choice between getting Chip Kelly or Bill O'Brien as your offensive coordinator, he would have said Chip Kelly. I mean, I think that's his.
We know you know that, or
no, I don't know. I don't know that. I'm speculating. I'm just complete speculation. But given their history, I just think Ryan Day probably thought, well, he's the head coach at UCLA. Why would he leave? And knew he was looking at NFL jobs and thought, okay, that's where his heart is. Now, I'm assuming they talked. I mean, they're close.
Oh, they had to have talked. If they're that close, they've had to have discussions, right?
The other thing, he had to kind of get out of his UCLA job. I mean, there was a little bit of stuff there. I mean, UCLA's got its problems. It's got budget issues. This was an amicable divorce between Chip Kelly and UCLA. UCLA is not crying that Chip Kelly left. No. And Chip Kelly was very complimentary toward UCLA, but obviously he was ready to leave too. That's pretty clear. I just think that, I could be wrong, but I just think if you were to ask Ryan Day, who would you rather have, Chip Kelly or Bill O'Brien, he would have said Chip Kelly. I mean, he knows Chip Kelly. He didn't know Bill O'Brien. I mean, he kind of knew of him, and there was a little bit of a relationship, but not like right. Chip Kelly.
Well, all we know is that Bill O'Brien was the OC for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So there's something there. It's a question we probably need to ask.
Well, he's not. We can ask. We're probably not going to get an honest answer, right? Unless it's. We won't know if it's an honest answer, because what's he going to say? I really wanted Bill O'Brien over my dear friend.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of friends out there that aren't coaching together. I guess that's my point. There's a lot of best friends that are a little hesitant to do that. I talked to somebody yesterday and said that, Ryan Day maybe has hired too many of his friends, and maybe now at least let's face it. Look who the replacements are. If you just want to step back and look at this, sort of as a third party observer, you lost a quarterback's coach who Corey Dennis, and you replaced him with Tulsa, and you replaced him with Chip Kelly. That's a pretty big win. And you lose a special teams coach / was he also
by subtraction?
Was he also linebackers at all, or
no,
he wasn't?
No,
right?
no.
Well, anyhow, you lose him, and you have James Laurinaitis. That seems like an upgrade to me. Now, we don't know how good James Laurinaitis will be with the linebackers, but that seems like an upgrade. It seems like 2 upgrades. So just on that alone, the staff is stronger.
Yeah, I don't think that he had a great staff last year. I think he had a young staff. He had to do Ryan Day had to do way too much on offense. I think the defense was fine. I think Perry Eliano was fine as safeties coach, but Jim Knowles kind of wanted his own guy, so they hired Matt Guerrieri. But I don't think Perry Eliano was a problem. Yeah, I just think that just the preference there. But no question, Rob. I mean, absolutely. Chip Kelly versus Corey Dennis and James Laurinaitis over Parker Fleming, obviously different roles. That's a That's not great.
They were very young last year on the staff, which was a big reason why they had guys like Joe Philbin and Todd Fitch and support staff roles to try to supplement sort of the inexperience. But I mean, we talked about it at times last year when they lost Kevin Wilson. It felt like there was maybe a little bit of a brain drain where you're losing your most experienced, your veteran guys who have been around college football for such a long time. I mean, Kevin Wilson was at the forefront of the spread revolution in the Big Ten at Northwestern in 2000. Well, Chip Kelly's a guy who also borrowed ideas from Randy Walker. So I think they've gone back a little bit to making sure they have that level of experience where you have guys who really have knowledge that goes back decades. And now you have that with Chip Kelly. Any other final thoughts before we wrap up?
Yeah, just that it's obvious that Ohio State is all in this year, that this is the year. 3 losses in a row to Michigan, watching Michigan win the national championship. I think there is a feeling that it's either championship or bust, or very close to a championship or bust. I mean, they have to. I think winning the Big Ten is one goal. Beating Michigan's obviously. I mean, Michigan's down this year. They lost so many people. That's the first thing they got to do. Well, it's the last thing they got to do, but it's the highest priority. But that's just the beginning. And this is a team that knows, and these guys all came back. I mean, obviously the NIL money helps, but they came back to win a championship as well. And this has been a very successful group of players in a lot of ways, but they haven't won anything. And they embrace the pressure. Chip Kelly embraces the pressure. Ryan Day. I mean, this is 10-2 this year won't cut it. I mean, it might actually cut it because you have a 12-team playoff and you could survive it. But they need this to be the kind of year that people expect it to be. I would say it has to be at least CFP semifinals, at least. And, you get to the finals and you lose. I mean, it's tough to win a national championship. I don't think it's fair to say national championship or bust. That's just harsh. But they need to be right there. And, if they struggle this year, boy, it'll be surprising for one thing, and it'll be really tough for all of Buckeye Nation to take.
If they beat Michigan, win the Big Ten, finish second in the Big Ten, make the playoff, I'm not sure. If you're talking job security for Ryan Day, I think beating Michigan. I
wasn't say job security. He still got a huge buyout.
I mean, right. But I'm just saying, what are we talking then? I mean, it's like, I think, let's talk job security. I would say for Ryan Day, he probably they need to make the playoff and they need to win a game. I'm not sure they need to make the final. I'm not sure they need to make the semis. I think that'd help him. But I think, to your point, Bill, I mean, Michigan's number one. And yeah, Michigan's down. But that's the both sides of the coin, right? Michigan's down, so there's pressure. You better beat them, because if you lose to them when you're down, then we've got another new narrative to talk about there. But it's going to be a lot of expectation. I like your terminology. They're all in. The chips are in. It feels that way. They're going to push back against that. They may embrace we're all in one sense, but all in what comes with all in is you are all out if it doesn't work. So it's a razor's edge here. And there's so much going on this season, but they get a huge benefit in it going from 4 to 12 teams.
And you have a 12-team playoff takes a lot of the pressure off. And let's face it, this is a loaded roster. There are 2 real questions on this team: quarterback and offensive line. And I think you feel reasonably good about quarterback. You just don't know. I mean, anytime there's a new quarterback, and Will Howard was good at Kansas State, but he wasn't Heisman caliber at Ohio State or Kansas State. And then there's the offensive line. And you have, I think it'll be better, but it has to be a lot better. I think Seth McLaughlin at center or an improved Carson Hinsman will be important. I think Josh Simmons having a year under his belt will be important. Donovan Jackson wants to take another step forward. And then again, the right side of the line, whoever that is, needs to play better. And so if the offensive line plays to Ohio State standard this year, I think, they really should be one of the 2 best teams in the country.
They should be. I would agree with that. let's not forget Kyle McCord only lost one game last year. So there's a lot of pressure on whoever the quarterback is. You can say he's an upgrade, right? Oh, he's better than Kyle McCord. Both these guys, they're better than Kyle McCord. Kyle McCord wasn't very good. Kyle McCord came within one pass of beating Michigan potentially. I'm not here to praise Kyle McCord, but it just shows you that the quarterback, it's not an easy position in Ohio State or anywhere, any big football factory. But I mean, Will Howard has to, the minimum, whoever it is, the minimum is you have to win every regular season game.
Well, the Oregon game will be a tough one. I don't think there'll be skies falling if they lose the close game at Oregon. But if they,
what I'm saying is a quarterback, if that comparison game starts, the Buckeye Nation will go, well, Kyle McCord we didn't like Kyle McCord, but he didn't lose a game till Michigan. This guy, whoever he is, isn't as good as Kyle McCord. I'm just saying there's a lot of pressure, man. That's why they get paid the big bucks, NIL.
I get the sense Will Howard is mentally capable of handling that pressure. I just talking to him, I think he's very, very self-confident. He kind of has, I think he embraces this. I really do get that sense that he
has to.
That pressure. What?
He has to. He has to embrace it, and he's not allowed to lose a game.
He's a pretty resilient quarterback. He didn't come up as a prime blue chip prospect. He came to Kansas State, got thrown into the fire during their COVID season under a new coach, and then Kansas State kept recruiting quarterbacks to try to replace him, and he kept kind of fending them off and ended up starting 27 games and led them to a Big 12 championship. And so I think he's got some thick skin, and he's been around the block. He's got that sort of grittiness to him. At least it's sort of the way his career has kind of charted its course to Columbus here.
Well, I'll leave you on this because I think we all agree. I think if you gave us truth serum, we'd say that we think Will Howard will be the starting quarterback at this moment. There's a lot of spring and fall camp. But I think if you gave us truth sermon last year, we'd all said that Kyle McCord was the guy too. I mean, Devin Brown was pretty far down the list at this moment last year, and that thing went into camp. They were still playing they were playing regular season games before that got decided. So, I think Will Howard is the guy, but nothing would shock me after what we saw last year.
Well, that sets the table here for spring football practice. Thanks as always for joining us on the BuckeyeXtra football podcast. Thanks for listening.
Be sure and subscribe to the BuckeyeXtra podcast in the iTunes Store, the Google Play Store, or on Stitcher.
Just going to run this dog to see if we can find any type of human remains that are left.
Listen to Where Secrets Go to Die, The Disappearance of Derek Hennigan. From the Detroit Free Press, a new podcast set in the woods of Michigan's Upper Peninsula. Available on Apple, Spotify, Freep.com, or wherever you get your podcasts.